Hello, and welcome to this study in the book of Job. This study is brought to you each Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on both Facebook and YouTube by the Port Huron Church of Christ, located at 756 17th Street. You got it, right here in the city of Port Huron. My name is Lamar Black, and I'll be the host for this series, along with my trusty cameraman and professional timekeeper, Jim Patnod. Before we jump into the contents of the book, we want you to know how much we really appreciate you joining us for this inspiring journey through the book of Job. Today, with this being our first meeting, I thought I would give you an idea of what to expect and to map out the parameters of our path that will serve as a guide for this study. So here we go. The first thing that I want you to know is that we're going to hold each session to about 35 to 40 minutes max. So what I'm saying is this: if we have reached that maximum time and we're in the middle of a thought, we're going to conclude the thought and then we'll end the study for the night. I promise that's the way it's going to work. Also, as far as the material of Job is considered, the question is, it's a lot in Job. How are we going to eat this elephant? And the answer to that is the only way you can, one bite at a time. Therefore, I've decided, and this is my goal, is to pace the class in a way to keep it interesting as possible, but at the same time to keep you engaged into what is going on. And believe me, there is a lot going on in the book of Job that's beyond just the superficial that we get when we just read the book. And as we look at those things, I want you to give extra consideration to what we're reading and look for new things that you never saw before, because I promise you, if you give yourself diligently to this, you're going to discover that there's a lot in there that you really never thought about before. So let's do this, give it our full attention and thought, because the book of Job is worthy for that. So in order to pull this off and do this, I'm going to vary how we examine the contents of the book, because I realize that time just simply will not allow us to pick up every piece of the book and give it a full analysis of every word. You know, that would push this study well into the first year, if not the second, and that's just not something that we want to do with this study. So this is what I came up with that I'm proposing to you. There are pieces of information that we're going to come across that we are just going to acknowledge as we're flying over. We'll just point at them and let you know that it's there and how it relates to the big picture, almost as you would a landmark on the ground. We'll just make note of that, because it really doesn't necessarily influence how the big picture functions. The second thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the important pieces, and we're going to pause and give consideration to how these fit into the big picture. Now remember, it's the big picture that is important as we study. We can't get hung up on looking at the bark on every tree. If we do that, we'll miss our purpose. We'll miss the whole point of the forest. So we have to be careful what we do. So when we come across this type of information, we're going to pause and see how it fits into the big picture. And then the last piece of information that we'll come to is the more critical information, the more vital stuff that really impacts and changes and shapes the big picture. And that information, we're going to actually stop and pay a little bit closer attention to it and hold it and analyze it a little bit closer to see how it all works. Because remember, we are studying the big picture, not the tree. And we have to always keep that in mind. And if we execute this suitably, I believe that this strategy should keep the study both interesting and informative without feeling as though we're trudging through a lot of mud. Is that fair enough? I hope so. So we've talked about the length of our study, and we've talked about the strategy for covering the material. Now, let me say a little bit about the contents of the book. Because the contents of Job leaves in its wake a lot of unanswered questions, which means for someone studying the book, there is plenty of room for speculation as well as conjecture, which means that we can sit here all day and talk about what we think it means and all the possibilities of what it could mean, but that doesn't make any of that true, and none of those things really change the outcome of the book, nor does it help us to understand it any greater. So, if with your permission, I'm going to refrain from falling into those rabbit holes. We call them rabbit holes because once you jump in, you never know where they can lead, and you never know if you're going to see the light of day again. You can kind of get lost in there and totally abandon your purpose and forget what you were doing. Because I'm convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there's enough room and enough known information in the book of Job that makes the point of the book clearly without attempting to go where no man has gone before, which is quite possibly why no man has gone there before. So here, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I'm going to ask you a very simple question that's pertinent to the study. It's one that's always asked and part of the initial indoctrination to the study. And here it is. When was Job written? When was the dating of the book? You know what the answer is? We don't know. See how easy that was? And that was a true answer. Now, I'm going to add to that answer on next week, but I could have talked about that for 15 minutes. But at the end of the day, if it was critical and it was important to know, God would have included it. This is something that man does. We need to set things in a slot so that we can process. I get that. And we're going to try to set this stage for this study in a logical sequence so that you can follow it where it would make sense, because we in the West think logically. In the East, they not so much at all. They think just the opposite. So we're going to do that. But we're not going to get hung up on things where the book doesn't talk about just to try to come up with something new. It's pointless. So at times, we're going to have to challenge ourselves and ask some very hard questions. And in those times, we're going to have to take a definitive route through the book. Now, mind you, these will not change the message of the book, just the path that we take to get there. Let me give you another quick example of what I am saying, and we're going to spend more time on this later as well. There are at least three views to the book of Job. Three theological views, and here they are. The first view says that Job is a real person, and all the characters, the people that are mentioned in the book of Job, and the events that happened in the book of Job are all real. This really happened, and it's real. While the second viewpoint disagrees with that, and they say, no, Job is fictitious. He's not a real guy. He represents a thought, a principle. And all the characters that are named in the book represents principles of thought and not actual people themselves. Their sole purpose is a teaching to give us wisdom, because that is part of what Job is. It's a book of wisdom. It falls in the wisdom literature. So if you look at it as a principle guide, you can see how it will guide you in the realm of wisdom. So they conclude none of this is real. It's just a wisdom teacher. The third view kind of agrees and disagrees with both of these and says, I believe that the book is a combination of the two views together. Some parts are real and some parts are fictitious to make a point. Now look, I'm sure that this is just three. There are many, many others, but these are the three common theological views of the book. So you may be asking about this time, Lamar, what path are we going to take? Well, to that answer, you'll just have to wait and see. So having said that, it is quite probable that you will discover two facts. And I want you to catch this because this is very important here. The first fact is that what you have always thought you knew about the book of Job, that may be challenged. And to that I say, good. That is what Bible study is supposed to do. It's not to confirm what we think we know, because sometime, in addition to that, it corrects what we think we know. So when these things happen, when you reach these moments, and when you look at that and say, that's not what I always thought was going on there, challenge the moment. Challenge what is going on and give yourself permission to alter your thinking. And thereby you will grow. And that is the benefit of Bible study. Now the second point, more importantly, is it will challenge your theology about God. This area is a little bit more difficult, and that is why I saved it for last. Job is full of theology from beginning to end. It contains what we think we know about God and how he operates in the universe. Now, as we go through the book, I ask you to allow your theology to be challenged, and if necessary, give yourself permission to be wrong, to need correcting. And again, you will benefit greatly if you embrace these moments of this information instead of fighting them. I assure you that before we leave Job, get this now, before we leave the book of Job, your basic theology about God and how he operates the universe will be recalibrated. You can count on that. I know that's a big statement. But we operate, and I've noticed this in myself and others, in the general thinking of the populace, we feel that God operates in one way, and you can know that by the thoughts that people say, and I'll cover that when we get there, and find out from the book of Job that's not true at all. So by now you may be saying to yourself, and I don't blame you, you're going to say, Lamar, what makes you think that you're right and what I believe is wrong? And that's a valid question. I don't have a problem with that. But the answer to that question is up to you. So however you arrive at your answer to that question, I only want you to do one thing. I want you to use the book as the basis of your position. Use the book as you reach your conclusion. Now, I say that only because a lot of our theology has come from what we have heard in pulpits and other places, and not from extensive Bible study. So as you go through this with us, and as we examine the book of Job, hopefully you will gain new insights from the study. So by now you may be asking, Lamar, why study the book of Job? Well, you know what, to answer that question, to be honest, after I started looking at it from an analytical point of view instead of just reading it as I had over the years, I asked myself the very same question, because Job is not easy. In fact, it's very hard. But let me tell you some of the benefits you will find from the study of Job. First, it's an interesting book. It's a very fascinating account from one end to the other, and it's riveting. It's almost like a play. And what's interesting about it is that the author gave you some of the behind the scenes at the very beginning, so you know what's going on, even though the main character doesn't. So that's pretty interesting in and of itself. But then as you move through the book, theologically, it becomes very challenging to understand and know what's going on. And because it is also a theological book. It's theologically challenging to us, but the book in and of itself speaks about God, and he speaks about himself, so that makes it theological. It's not just what we think. God is going to straighten it all out, and that's what makes it theological. But at the same time, it's also a mysterious book. There are things that are happening that kind of defy our imagination, and we just try to figure things out. And we learn things, especially when God is talking about the universe, that blows our mind, because at the time Job was written, mankind didn't know any of these things. And we only learned about some of them recently, but this was written thousands of years ago. So it's a very mysterious book. And lastly, because of what God did to Job at the end of the book, it can be very intimidating to us as well, because we get caught up in some of these positions of these friends of Job's, and they talk, and we agree with them on some of the things that they say, and then God turns right around and said, they didn't know what they were talking about, and now you realize, well, he's talking to me too. So that makes it a little bit intimidating. So listen, and here it is. Here's the bottom line. You get all of this drama and intrigue in 42 short chapters. That's right. And on top of all of this, at times you will experience what I call theological confusion, and I'll talk about that later for you as well. So how much more can you ask out of a simple 42 chapters? That's why we're studying the book. So hopefully all of what I just said whets your appetite and creates in you a desire to swan dive right directly into the middle of the life of Job and to see God as you have never experienced him before. To maximize your Job experience, I want to ask you to do something. Would you please begin reading the book and continue reading and rereading throughout this study? I purposely didn't dive right into the book because I want to give you a week's head start in your reading. So as we get to these moments, you'll have a basis to work from because you familiarized yourself with this in your recent reading. So, well, now that we kind of have this all sketched out, I hope you see where we're going, and I hope you're looking forward to this. That's it for today. I just want to offer blessings to you in your life. And again, thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you right here. Same Job time, same Job channel. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.